conclusion, the perceived downsides of Supreme Court term limits are often overstated. A well-designed system can actually strengthen judicial independence and ensure a healthy balance of experience, fresh perspectives, ultimately benefiting the court and nation it serves. The case for implementing term limits for Supreme Court justices is compelling and rooted in the principles of accountability, fairness, and judicial independence. While the court plays a vital role in interpreting the Constitution and upholding justice, it should not be exempt from the democratic norms that govern other branches of government. By instituting term limits, we can ensure a more balanced and diverse judiciary free from the entrenchment of ideologies that may not reflect the evolving values of society. Term limits would also promote greater transparency, as judges would be more directly accountable to the public through their eventual departure. Dang it, I had more.
No, I think mine just too long.
It's okay. Go.
While some may think term limits are a good idea, it could cause serious problems for the Supreme Court. The current system of life tenure has worked for over 200 years, making sure that the court stays independent, stable and fair. The main reasons justices serve for life is so that they can make decisions without worrying about getting re-elected or pleasing politicians. If justices knew they had to leave after a set number of years, they start making decisions based on politics, not what the law says. Life tenure lets them focus on interpreting the law, not staying in favour of other politicians. Also, life tenure helps keep the law consistent. If justices had to leave every few years, there would be constant changes within the court, which makes the law unpredictable. Major legal rulings could change too quickly, confusing the public and lawmakers. With life tenure, justices have the time to develop deep expertise and make well thought out decisions. Some argue that term limits would bring fresh ideas, but we already have a way to do that. When the justice retires or passes away, a new one's appointed. This already falls for new perspectives without forcing justices to leave before they're ready.
I don't have a... Yeah, brother, that was our debate. Yep, we're done. Are we ready? Okay, I started it. Have you started the timer, Lachlan?
No, she's not started to speak. Right, go.
The U.S. federal government should mandate term limits for the Supreme Court. Longer terms have led to an increasingly political confirmation process and the court more likely to be out of touch with the general public. Mandated term limits should be implemented in the Supreme Court because there is no regularity in vacancies and each justice can now be easily expected to sit on the court for multiple decades. When they have sat on the court for multiple decades, it causes them to have the opinion from the past while we are needing the opinion of the present to make Supreme Court decisions. Recent research has examined how term limits can lead to more regular reversals of major decisions, particularly if individual justices largely ignore precedent. The result would be a court that better reflects prevailing public values, since staggering 18-year term limits would be bringing a regular turnover to the bench. People may argue on the fact that the Supreme Court welcoming a new justice every 2 years, turning over the entire course of 18 years could wreak havoc, but instead could help refresh the Supreme Court by bringing newer and possibly younger ideas to the courtroom. Because there is no regularity in vacancies and each justice can now be easily expected to sit on the court for multiple decades, Senate leaders have a strong incentive to upend the confirmation process in order to secure a justice appointed by a president of their same political party. Furthermore, term limits would demystify the court, making it more accessible and understandable to the American people. Regular appointments will become a normal part of our democratic process, not a once-in-a-generation event shrouded in political drama. The time for change is now. Term limits are not a radical departure from our traditions. They are a necessary evolution. They are a crucial step towards ensuring a Supreme Court that is truly representative, accountable, and equipped to meet the challenges of our time. Let's modernize our highest court and strengthen our democracy by embracing term limits for Supreme Court justices. Do I still have time?
Nah, in between 2 to 3 minutes, that should be good.
Does that look good? Cross-examine me.
Yeah.
Set the 2 minutes.
Sorry, so
Timer.
You talk about how long terms make justices out of touch with current society and term limits would bring in fresh perspectives. But if justices serves for only 18 years, wouldn't they be more influenced by politics since they would know they have to please the president or political party? Could this then hurt the court's independence?
Well, not technically, because the 18-year term limits would also be refreshing the political parties. If we were to have a court that sat there for decades on decades, they would still have the opinions of the decades that they started on the court with. But by bringing the 18-year term limit, it would refresh and help to better be more on the political of our society in the current time instead of from decades ago.
So, when you talk about how the term limits would help the court keep up with public opinions, which then change over time, is the Supreme Court not supposed to interpret law and not just follow popular opinions? So, should they then be using current trends or focus on the long-term legal principles?
I feel like they should follow the current trends. Because if they're to follow the current trends and it better suits the people of today's time, rather than following the long-term laws that are going to change over time, since the short-term trends are more what's in public, I guess.
Yeah, but then if they're following the current trends as such, would that not then be more opinionated laws rather than set in stone legal laws as such?
Technically it would, but also with today's day and time, laws are changing so much to fit the public and to fit society that it would be better, in my opinion, to follow the short-term trends.
Do you feel then, if the laws are changing so much, they should stick to the laws rather than go to trends, because the trends should match the laws, technically?
Yeah, I do agree with that, yeah.
That's it. I'm here to argue that the US government should not impose term limits on Supreme Court justices. While it might seem like a good idea to make sure justices don't stay too long, doing so would harm the independence and stability of the court, which are key to making sure justice is served fairly. The Supreme Court needs to be independent from politics to make fair decisions. If justices knew their time was limited, they might make decisions based on what will help them get reappointed or stay in good favour with the politicians. Life tenure, which is serving for life or until they choose to retire, helps justices make decisions without worrying about political pressure. One reason Supreme Court justices serve for life is to bring stability and consistency to the law. If justices only served for a set number of years, we would have constant turnover and the law would become unpredictable. Major rulings could change every few years, which would create confusion and uncertainty. The current system allows justices to have the time they need to develop deep expertise and make well thought out decisions. If justices knew they had to leave after a certain number of years, they might start making rulings based on politics, not on the law. Life tenure protects them from this kind of pressure. Justices can make decisions based on their interpretation of the law, not on how they might be viewed by the President or Congress when their term is up. The system of life tenure has worked for more than 200 years. It has allowed the Supreme Court to make important rulings that have shaped the country. The court needs stability to continue making decisions that protect our rights and balance the power between the branches of government. Some argue that term limits would bring new voices to the court, but the current system already allows for change. When a justice retires or passes away, the President can then nominate a new justice and the Senate confirms that nominee. This process already brings in new ideas and perspectives when needed without forcing justices to leave before they're ready. Instead of term limits, we could focus on fixing the way justices are appointed. The confirmation process is often too political, and we should work to make it fairer and less partisan. By improving the way justices are chosen, we can ensure the court stays impartial without forcing justices out of office. In conclusion, mandating terms limit for Supreme Court justices would hurt the court's independence, stability and ability to make fair decisions. Life tenure has worked well for over 2 centuries, helping the court remain impartial and consistent. Rather than term limits, we should focus on improving the appointment process we have just now to then ensure that justices stay accountable to the law.
Timer? You say the court needs stability by keeping the current system since it already allows for change, but wouldn't the term limits help bring younger and more on-trend ideas to the courtroom, helping more stability? bringing more stability to the current system?
It could, but there's already ways to bring younger people in, where it's through if someone retires or they feel they're not fit to do the job, is you can then appoint new, younger people to then come in and do the job, which then brings in the stability and the new ideas without forcing people out or forcing people to leave to be reappointed again.
But if we were like to have the limited or like the mandated term limits, then it would help to not have to like wait for someone to retire, wait for someone to not feel fit, or wait for someone to like be like, I quit.
Yeah.
And so then it could bring people who like have trained for it, are ready for it, instead of just trying to find someone.
It could, but at the same time, it could also force out the people that have like done the training for it for so long, and they still feel they're fit to do the job at the best of their ability, and they've also got so many years experience behind them. If they were to then be kicked out that job after 18 years of experience, they go, right, that's your time's done. It's unfair, and they then make decisions that would get them reappointed rather than focus on what's doing right for the job.
Yeah, that's true. We still have more time.
30 seconds.
How could the court stay partial if the court has the same people for decades with the same ideas they started with, when you could create newer people with brighter ideas that would be more partial on the trend that we're currently in the time of day?
I feel as the people get older and get more experience within that field, they can then adapt the way they see things, the way they deal with things, which means instead of bringing in new people, they would adapt their work style, which then brings in the new ideas and keeps everything flowing to the modern kind of society.
But it's still as though like the Supreme Court is, how do I put this, old as hell.
Yeah.
And so like they still have in their head their mindset of the old decades. Oh, okay. Okay. The claim that term limits diminish judicial independence rests on the assumption that justices would be more susceptible to political pressures, angling for future positions or favorable treatment after leaving the bench. This argument overlooks several key factors. First, justices are already subject to public scrutiny and political pressure regardless of term limits. Second, term limits could actually enhance independence by reducing the incentive for justices to make decisions based on legacy building or currying favor with potential future employers. A defined term allows justices to focus solely on interpreting the Constitution without the shadow of lifetime appointment influencing their decisions. Furthermore, a well-structured term limit system, such as staggering 18-year terms, would prevent any single president from appointing a majority of the court, mitigating concerns about undue political influence. Opponents of term limits argue that they would deprive the court of valuable experience and institutional knowledge. While experience is undoubtedly important, it doesn't necessarily equate to better decision-making. Fresh perspectives and new legal scholarship brought in by regularly appointed justices can invigorate the court and prevent it from becoming stagnant. Moreover, retired justices with term limits would still be available to contribute to the legal field through teaching, scholarship, and lower court service. Their wisdom wouldn't disappear, it would simply be channeled in different, potentially even more impactful ways. Finally, a system of staggering term limits ensures a balance between experienced justices and newer appointees, preserving institutional memory while allowing for the interrogation of evolving legal thought.
Bang on 2 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the idea of term limits for Supreme Court justices aim to bring fresh, modern perspectives and reduce political drama. It's important to consider the risks of such a change. The argument that term limits would bring younger and more on-trend ideas overlooks the importance of experience and long-term consistency in legal decisions. The Supreme Court deals with complex constitutional issues that require deep legal knowledge, something that often comes with years of experience. Replacing justices every 18 years could lead to a constant shift in perspective, making it harder for the court to provide consistent rulings on important legal matters. The law requires stability, and frequent turnover could disrupt that. While some argue that life tenure leads to outdated thinking, life tenure actually shields justice justices from political pressure. Without the worry of reappointment, justices can rule based on their interpretation of the law, not on popular opinion or the wishes of the party in power. If term limits were in place, justices might feel pressured to align with current political trends to ensure their place in history or to secure future appointments. The concern that the confirmation process has become overly politicised is valid, but term limits could make this problem worse. Having a new justice appointed every 2 years would result in constant political battles over appointments, making the Senate's role even more contentious. This wouldn't demystify the court, it would instead turn every appointment into a political spectacle, potentially weakening the court's independence and further dividing the public.
How much time?